Many of us recognize the enormous benefits of empowering our teams to take ownership of their work, but we often feel we lack the time or resources to get that done. One of the best ways to drive the ownership mindset is to destigmatize the hiding of our flaws through deep self-discovery and vulnerability. In this episode, the power of the ownership mindset and how to bring it to your organization. Welcome to 2024's first episode of Meet the Author Live. I'm your host, John Saunders, founder of Forward Advisory Solutions, a coaching and consultancy firm, and the author of The Optimizer, building and leading a team of serial innovators. My firm was built on the foundation of over 20 years as an executive distribution leader on Wall Street and relentless focus on collaborative innovation and problem solving. This show offers you thought leadership wisdom through live conversations with the ability to get questions answered live in the chat. To start, please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. It's always awesome to get a sense of where people are calling in from. And if you know Kerry, by all means, send her a note in there to say hello. We also want to make sure you know how to use the chat function because we'll use that around the midway point of the conversation to take your questions live here. And that's always a lot of fun. So in today's episode, we'll meet new author and CEO Kerry Siggins and discuss her new book, The Ownership Mindset, a handbook for transforming your life and leadership. Her book digs into the ever-challenging concept of owning every decision we make, which isn't easy. You'll certainly hear from Kerry's journey. Kerry Siggins, a bit about Kerry. She's the CEO of StoneAge, the leading global high-pressure industrial cleaning equipment manufacturer. Under her leadership, StoneAge transformed into a powerhouse in the industrial cleaning industry, disrupting how the world is cleaned. Kerry also led StoneAge's transition to become 100% employee-owned. And StoneAge has won numerous awards, including Outside Magazine's Best Places to Work. Kerry's an expert speaker and writer on transformational leadership, culture creation, employee ownership, and cultivating the ownership mindset, a blueprint for empowering yourself, others, and your company to reach your full potential. A national finalist for EY's Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2023 and Colorado Biz Magazine's 2023 CEO of the Year, Kerry has a unique ability to inspire others by sharing her journey, thought leadership, and the blueprint for adopting the ownership mindset. Kerry Siggins, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
It is such a pleasure to have you. And I had the great privilege to read your book over the last couple of weeks. And as I read through it, I really appreciate the perspectives that you share to help us rethink vulnerability and the power of owning our journeys, right? So many times, I sadly have some of these stories myself. We sort of want to look to other places for how to solve our problems, right? And many times it's inside of us. And as I read through your book, I found so many lessons that you share that will push us outside of our comfort zone. And I bet others will feel the same. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
When you think about every stage of your life, I thought it'd be fun to start here. Like everything about your story is about competitive spirit, from the education, from your education to collegiate softball in your career. Where do you think that drive came from?
Well, my mom says I came out of the womb the CEO of the family, so I'm guessing it came. I came by it naturally. I came by it probably genetically, but because I was a natural born leader, I think I was always driven to try to help people, try to make things better. For some parts of my life, to try to win. Winning is less important to me now than it was when I was younger. But yeah, I think that it was just a part of my DNA. Like my mom said, like you were the boss of this family from 2 years old.
You started early. And a quick shout out. We had a little delay in the chat coming in here. We've got several folks chiming in here already. Robert Lane from Scottsdale, Arizona. Angel Lorente from Long Island. Welcome. Gary Kolodzik, did I get that right? From Chicago. Sylvia Santana from Pittsburgh. Joshua Barry, welcome. Joshua, great to see you on here from Lincoln, Nebraska. Oh, and Rajesh from Hoboken, welcome. Thanks for joining us, everybody. So, Kerry, the ownership mindset, like what really pushed you to get this thing out there and go through the challenge of writing a book? It's no easy task, right?
No, you know how hard it is. Writing it, publishing it, marketing it. It's so much work and such a learning experience. Why did I write this book? Well, on Labor Day of 2006, I accidentally overdosed on a cocktail of mixed substances. And for many, many years, I was ashamed of it and I kept it a secret. And when I came to Stone Age, I didn't tell anybody. And, but it was like this secret inside of me. And I knew that I needed to share it because it was such a huge part of my story and my journey, especially coming to home to Durango and getting employed by Stone Age. And during a team building session, a couple of years after I started at Stone Age, we were doing these big icebreakers around vulnerability and sharing stories. And I felt like this was the time that I needed to share my story. I needed to tell my team about this very significant point in my life, this inflection point in my life. And I was scared, but I decided I was going to be brave and tell them. And I did. And what happened was amazing. As I told my story, I could see people leaning in, connecting more. And then after I got finished telling my story, the next person said, "Well, I wasn't going to share this, but since you shared this really dark time in your life, Kerry, I'm going to tell you about what really happened with XYZ." And then everybody started opening up and we became so much stronger as a team. And that's when I realized the value of being vulnerable, of sharing your flaws. And I wrote this book because I wanted to destigmatize that. I wanted to destigmatize this idea that as leaders, we can't be real human beings. As leaders, we have to hide certain parts of ourselves. As leaders, we can't have flaws and show our team, the world, what those flaws are. Our flaws can be our superpowers if we lean into them and learn from them. And so that was really the driving motivation to write this book.
I just want to recap something here for our listeners. So here you are. You were the general manager of Stone Age at the time, right? When you shared the story with the team building?
I was. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You're the GM. You're sort of still kind of new-ish to the company, maybe a couple of years versus the, sort of over a decade now. And you decided at a team building exercise to kind of spice things up a bit and reveal to people that you overdosed and almost died from drugs. I mean, talk about putting yourself in a vulnerable position. But as I've learned in life, vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And sure enough, it opened all these doors to that meeting and helped everyone connect. Speaking of sort of that benefit you saw there, how else have you seen vulnerability play a benefit to you and your company over time and leadership?
Oh, vulnerability. I mean, it's the cornerstone of the own it mindset. That and personal responsibility. We need to share who we really are to be able to build those deep, meaningful relationships. And Stone Age is built on the foundation of our teamwork. And to be really great teammates, people have to get to know who you are and not just the work side of you, the whole person. I mean, let's face it, we don't come to work as our work person and go home as our home person. We are whole people. And when we take the time to share ourselves with our colleagues and our coworkers and listen to the experience of our teammates as well, we can build such deeper bonds and deeper connections. And so it leads to people being happier at work, feeling more connected, feeling like they belong, feeling like they're accepted for who they are. And those benefits are tremendous when you're building a culture, when you're looking at how do you build a productive workforce who really is driving the vision of the company forward. And vulnerability is a really key aspect of that. So that's what I've learned leading through my leadership journey, through my vulnerability journey, and watching so many of my fellow employee owners take that risk and get a little bit vulnerable and realize that it really does help them connect more deeply with their fellow colleagues.
Connect to their colleagues, connect to their work, connect to their passion, connect to their jobs. And, the results have followed. I was sharing a little bit about your story to a friend of mine who shall remain nameless for this little nugget here. But he was sharing, he's a C-suite person at a company here in the area I live in the DC area. And he shared, everyone and his organization is trying to have a similar philosophy, but he's actually expressed a lot of frustration around it. Well, all I ever hear is people complaining about how they're upset or sad or and it just really distracts from work. What would you say to that person? What would you, I think to me, this, sort of how do you get past this hump of like, oh, we're not just going to hug all the time and actually get something done around here?
Well, we do hug all the time around here at Stone Age because we're big huggers, but we get a lot done. I would say two things to that. First, if somebody needs to talk about something that's going on in their life, we have to make space for it. they can't let that go if they don't feel like their boss, their company cares about them. And sometimes you have to listen. And that's something that I want every single one of my employees to know, is that I care about them, that this company cares about them. And if they're going through a hard time, or they need to talk about something difficult that's going on in their life, that they have space to do that. And when you do it, it helps them process through it and go, okay, I feel better. My boss knows, my company knows, I feel supported. Now I can start to focus back in on my work. So don't be afraid of those hard conversations. And I know everybody is, at a different level of comfortability of leaning into those conversations, but there's nothing more important than your employees knowing that you care about them. And that means that sometimes you have to just sit down and listen when they're going through a rough time. The second thing is that when people feel like they belong and people feel like they are trusted, they're willing to give more. And so that foundation really starts with trust. And so you need to be able to build those relationships with people, in the hard times, in the good times, and through that care and through that trust, then you will see that productivity happening. But if you're a manager who's like, leave your work stuff, or leave your home stuff at home, only bring in the work, I don't care about that, you don't create that trust, you don't create that sense of belonging. And then why would people show up with the ownership mindset, thinking and acting like an owner? Like, if the company doesn't care about me, why would I care about the company? And so I think it takes leaders really being willing to lean into this idea of I'm here, I care about you, I'm going to help you, and I trust you to build this type of culture.
I so appreciate that thought around this. And another, I'll say nuanced piece to that story is, if that person is having a terrible day for whatever reasons, something's happening in their personal life, or in their, maybe they're in conflict with a coworker, and you don't get it out on the table, right? What happens? Like, they walk around angry all day and
Yeah,
spend much of that day with wasted time anyway. So talk about not getting something done, right? So,
exactly.
I mean, I think the ROI here is pretty darn extraordinary. Not to mention the connection, the cohesiveness that you create around the organization. So creating that space
Yep.
and developing trust. Trust is such a key part of the book that you talk about. What does trust look like to you, and where did you sort of first uncover that as a leader?
I mean, trust looks like connecting with my colleagues, understanding who they are, having them understand me, and giving them space to do their jobs. Trust means different things for different people, and people have to go on that journey to figure out what that means for them. But trust is such a foundational piece of the ownership mindset, and getting that culture where people do feel like I can think and act like an owner because I'm trusted to be able to do that. And when I came to Stone Age, I didn't really have that. I was definitely lost. I mean, I was coming off of a couple of month recovery after my overdose, and trying to figure out how to rebuild my life. And I had a really crappy work experience when I had left Austin. And I'm totally to blame for that, but I didn't see it that way back then. But what I realized is that there was no trust. I didn't trust my company. My company didn't trust me. We were just there to get stuff done. And how I began to really learn the power of trust is the way that the founders of Stone Age treated me. I mean, first, they took this huge risk and hired me when I was 28 years old. Now, mind you, they didn't know, all of my history, and really what I was trying to overcome: addiction and self-esteem issues, and all of these things that were really kind of pulling me back, holding me back, how I was holding myself back. But they saw something in me, and they trusted their instincts and hired me, even though it was an incredible risk. And then in those first couple of years, they gave me rope to learn. And so they would do things like say, oh, well, I don't necessarily agree with that idea, but we're going to go ahead and let you try it. Let's see where this goes. Or, I mean, I remember having to let an employee go who'd been with us over 20 years. And I was just completely afraid of the ramifications of what was going to happen. What were our employees going to think? What were our customers going to think? And as we were talking through it, John Wolgamont, one of our founders, said, look, you're making the right decision. You have done all the right things to try to turn the situation around. I trust you to do this. And it was so incredibly empowering. And so I don't think it was this intentional thing that they had in mind of like, we're teaching her how to think and act like an owner. But they knew that if I was going to be successful, that they were going to have to trust me to make decisions, trust me to make mistakes and fix them. And that's when I really learned the power of trust. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity John and Jerry gave me to learn so early in my career and to build that trust with them and the rest of the Stone Age employees.
I mean, what an incredible story. And a wise person once said to me, if you want to figure out if you can trust someone, go ahead and trust them, see what happens, right?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
clearly, these gentlemen took that chance on you. And I think one of the stories that really blew my mind about you is when one time there was something happening with some, given the global landscape we're sort of dealing with in business today and what's not, you know, this was probably 14, 15 years ago, where they took a chance on you and sent you off to China for a big
Yeah.
operation. What was that story about?
Yeah, this was accumulation. So this was right before I was named CEO, and we had we had learned that our biggest Chinese dealer was copying our products. I know, shocking, but we had this very long term relationship with them, and it was not something that we were expecting. And this dealer, this they had been dealers of ours for long before I had come on to Stone Age, and so I went to John and I said, "Hey, here's the information that we have, and I think that we need to go to China and we need to go figure this out. I mean, this is worth millions of dollars, and their sales were declining. Something was going on." And he said, "Kerry, I think you should go. You've done all of this work to build these relationships. You've with other dealers who are bringing forward this information. I trust you to go and find out what's going on and make the best decision for the company." Now you have to imagine this was very scary for me. I've never been to Asia before, and I've never been to a country that speaks so little English. And I did have we had a person who was helping with us, who's an employee now, Sword Zoo, who was going to meet me there. But I was so afraid of like, how what if I make this wrong decision, and how am I going to go to this country and where I know nobody and have no idea how to get around. And so I went, and Sword met me there along with one of my other colleagues, and we visited all of our dealers, and we got proof that the dealer was actually copying the product. And so on the last visit, we went to visit them, and we sat down with the sales manager, the VP of sales, so to speak, and I put everything in front of him and I said, "This is what we've learned." Now, the Chinese culture has a very, it's very, they hate being embarrassed, right? It's called saving face. And I knew this. So I knew I was going to be putting him on the spot. And he said, "No, we are not copying your products." And so I
Right,
pushed
right
back
to your
and
face.
right to my face, just lied right to my face. And
Through a translator, though, right?
through a translator, like Sword's translating everything for us. And so went back and forth for a little bit, and then he got up with the other two people who were in the room with him and left. And we sat in this room for an hour waiting for him to come back, having no idea what was going on. I mean, we had a taxi. We had the taxi stay and wait for us because we didn't know what was going to happen, if we were going to get kicked out, like what was going to transpire. And then the sales manager, he came, but the sales leader came back and he said, "Yes, we're copying your products." And this was not my decision. This was the decision made by the CEO, and we're going to ask you to leave now. And so it's like, okay, well, I think this relationship is over. And I got back to the United States and I shared what had happened with John, and I was really concerned. I mean, this was millions of dollars worth of business. And did I make the right decision? And he said, "You did make the right decision. This company is always about doing the right thing. And we can't work with people who don't do the right thing." And luckily, it turned out in our benefit. All of our other Chinese dealers stepped up, and we didn't see a decrease in sales at all. In fact, we saw sales increase. And so it was a really huge lesson in trust. And right after that was when I was named CEO of the company. And so having that kind of autonomy and that kind of trust to go do something really big, really important, and also very scary, right? Getting outside of my comfort zone, it was a really big deal, and it made me feel so empowered, and like I truly belonged at this company because I had that kind of trust of the founders and of the company.
I could just picture you there, sort of young-ish in your career and certainly young in this new career, right? After
Yes.
changing gears. And, I'm guessing it wasn't probably a lot of women you were interacting with over there. Is that a fair statement?
A little bit. A lot of women are translators over there, but not really in any kind of leadership positions. More so now, but not back then. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
It was all
like
men.
all these like awkward dynamics to overcome, and you not only overcame them, but you came to a resolution that was, beneficial for your company, and your business actually expanded all through this journey of trust with your employer. I mean, that's such an incredible story. And I'll just make a quick plug here for if people want to hear more of Kerry's stories about reflecting about leadership, I would definitely recommend her podcast. It's called Reflect Forward. You can find more information about it at kerrysiggins.com/podcast. So let's keep going here. You've had this extraordinary run in your career here, now 14 years as the CEO and a couple of years as the GM. But early in your career, right, you really looked at success, I think, a little bit differently, and we're struggling with what success looked like. Where did that sort of realization to redefine success come from?
Yeah, I mean, success was all about me in my 20s, and it was part of my downfall. This really focus on self rather than focus on others, and 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 it was kind of a combination of me needing to rebuild my life and knowing that the way that I was doing things wasn't working, and coming to work for Stone Age and having this opportunity to completely change my life was when I decided that I can't make it about me. And so I had to redefine success as my success is based on everybody else's. If everybody else around me is successful, then I'm going to be more successful. I was working so hard before I came to Stone Age to be successful, and it was just this awful grind. I was so miserable. I wasn't getting anywhere, but I didn't realize it was because I wasn't focused on being a great teammate. I wasn't focused on what can I really do for the company. I was only focused on how do I win? How do I be the most successful? How do I sell the most? How do I give the fastest promotion? And so it was, it was really being able to come here to Stone Age and the work that I was doing on myself. The most powerful thing that I did when I started here was I asked questions. So I'm 28. I come into the company. I know nothing about the industry. I've never actually even managed a person before. And now I'm managing an entire company. And there's no way I can BS my way through this. I have to show up with humility. And here I'm surrounded with all of these amazing people who know so much. And I just decided I was going to learn from them rather than come in and try to prove myself, right? Oh, they hired me for a reason. Well, yes, they did, but I didn't have that credibility yet, and I needed to earn that, and I recognized that. So I just started asking questions, and so a problem would come up, and I would ask my colleagues, "Well, what do you think? How do you think we should fix this? What do you think the biggest problem is? How should we tackle this?" And together, we started solving a lot of these problems that were hindering our growth, and we grew so fast in those first couple of years, and it came from us working together. And so that is when I really saw how the power of working with other people, the power of lifting them up, of developing them, of asking their opinions, of making them part of the solution, how that made us much more successful together. And so now asking questions is my favorite thing to do. That's the whole reason why I have a podcast is I love interviewing and asking people questions, and I'm really curious about the way people think. And that was a huge lesson for me early on in my career and really helped me redefine success.
Curiosity drives collaboration,
Yes.
commitment, and results,
Yes.
quite frankly, right? Had you come in and said, "Hey, I'm the new manager. Here's how we're going to do things," everybody sort of shut up and sit down, which sadly I've had that experience at some point in my career. It's a thing that some people think is a good idea. You didn't take that approach at all. In fact, you put yourself in that vulnerable position of like, "Hey, I don't have it all figured out here." And I'm willing to bet that, as you said, the results came very quickly from this.
Yeah.
These were problems that were sort of sitting on the surface, and people were sort of afraid to say, "Gosh, should I tell people what's going on here?" And you surface them through that curiosity. I mean, wow, that's amazing. Speaking of curiosity and just asking questions about how business is going and how people are doing, you also talk about the power of feedback in your book and how curiosity can help you there. You've had some challenging feedback in your career. I know you had a story there where somebody gave you some pretty harsh feedback. What was that story, and how did that make you feel?
The harshest piece of feedback I've ever gotten is the biggest gift of feedback. It was in 2018, and my COO at the time we were butting heads, and he's a brilliant, amazing person, so talented, just led with a much more authoritarian style than the way that I lead. And he'd been growing with the company, started out as engineering manager, had really grown with the organization, and but he wanted more. And he's like, I want to be the CEO after you. And I told him, I said, I don't think you can be. And first of all, I'm not going anywhere. And two, I don't think that you have the temperament to be able to lead after me, or that's going to be such a huge shift in leadership. And I just don't see it. And he got really, really upset. And he said, you think you're this inspiring leader. You think you're this disruptive leader. Really, what you are is just erratic. You drive and you drive and you drive. And not everybody most people can't even follow where you're going. And I was stunned,
Wow.
and it hurt. I mean, it was one of the most painful moments of my career. And I had to really sit back and not react. I've been working on not reacting in the moment. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to have to take some time to process this, and let's leave now, and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll pick this up. And I kept my composure until I walked out of the office, and I got in my car and I cried the whole way home. As soon as I got to my house, I told my husband what had happened, and I just said, I'm not cut out to be a CEO. If this is what my employees think of me, that I'm like this crazy erratic person, like, why am I doing this? What am I even doing? And my husband was so good in that moment. And after saying a few, like, cuss words at the guy, because he was, he's got to be my like tough husband and stand up for me. He said, look, you are one of the fastest moving, brilliant people that I know. And yes, you are exhausting. You do drive and drive and drive, and you usually are 15 steps ahead of people. So why don't you just figure out how to take the good from this feedback and let the rest go? How do you use this to propel you forward? But let let the erratic, let all that go. Like, that is not who you are. And so I decided to take his advice, and I got a good night's sleep. And the next morning I was feeling much more rational. It's like, okay, how do I take the good from this feedback? And I decided to focus on that word erratic. And I said, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself. Like, I do drive really fast, and I do have a fear of saying no, because I don't want to miss on an opportunity to grow the company. And so I'm probably saying yes to too many things. And maybe it does feel like we're jumping here to here and here. I know where we're going. I know what this industry is going to look like and how these decisions are going to help us get there. But am I really leading in a way that helps people see that vision, help people feel part of that vision, and trust my decision making? And I decided at that moment I was never going to be called erratic again. And so two things happened from that. One, my cool, calm, and collected mantra. And you could talk to many of my Stone Age employees who were around then, who have watched my leadership style really change. I decided I was going to be unflappable. There was nothing that was going to just get me wrapped up. I can be really passionate about what I do. I'm very expressive, and sometimes that can be overwhelming. Maybe that is can make people feel like I'm a little erratic. So cool, calm, and collected. Nothing is going to shake me. And then I wrote out a vision statement, what the future looks like. It's literally titled that. And we still use it to today to drive our vision forward. We update it with what we did well, what changed, what we didn't do well, what we learned. And that is really our strategy. And when I shared that with people, they were just like, oh, I see it. And now people can connect the dots because of that. I would not be the leader I am today without that feedback, even though it hurt, even though it made me question if I had what it takes to be a CEO. And but there's always a gift. There's always a gift in feedback if you look for it. There's always a way to own a piece of feedback, even if you don't feel it's true, right? If somebody says this is how I'm experiencing you, then that's how they're experiencing you, and you can do something about that. So always own something in that feedback. Always look for a way to learn from the feedback. It can transform your leadership.
I mean, so many compelling nuggets about that story there, and such insights. And a couple that strike me is I'm sure there are people on this listening in right now that are thinking, I would have fired that guy on the spot, right? And yet you didn't. You took that bitter pill. And if I heard you correctly, you didn't ask for this feedback. It came unsolicited. Is that a fair
Yes, that's
statement?
correct. Mhm.
Yeah. So it wasn't even like the sort of typical version of you where you're being curious and saying, hey, how should we do this better? This, sort of, I'm sure it felt like an attack. And yet you
Yep.
kept your composure in the moment, found a way to sort of get outside the office and get some space for yourself, and then talk it over and think through it. But you maintained your curiosity. You, if I could paraphrase Joshua Bear here, dared to be naive about the situation and think, what can I learn from this, and sort of take from this? And that's exactly what you did. What an extraordinary story. And if people want to hear more of these stories, I told you a little bit about Kerry's podcast. Definitely recommend going out and getting the Ownership Mindset book, a handbook to transforming your life and leadership. Such an extraordinary story, and plenty of stories like this in there more. We've got a few more questions we're going to run through. Then we're going to open up to audience questions. So I'd encourage you to start dropping those in the chat if you would. So Kerry, the if we're not having this transparency that we can have, this trust, we can have disengagement, right? And that is a bigger problem when people are kind of checked out. So why is that? What have you seen as the biggest drawback to disengagement in your team, and how have you kind of solved for that?
Yeah, I mean, disengagement is contagious. And so you really have to work on it as an organization. And I think a lot of leaders think that they don't have a disengagement problem, but there's a statistic out there. I think I can't remember. Vital Health did a survey on it, and only four out of 10 employees say that the culture that that leadership says that the company has is actually the culture they experience. So there's this really big disconnect that leaders have with actually what's going on in their organization, and I have to fight against this too. The bigger you get as a leader, the harder it is to keep your finger on the pulse of all the organization. And disengagement, it impacts productivity, it impacts morale, it impacts happiness at work. And so leaders need to care about it, because if you have employees who are disengaged, then you are not solving your customers' problems as best as you could have. You're not bringing value to your customers the way that you could. You are not building the company the way that you could. You're not creating success the way that you could. So really understanding why people are disengaged and begin addressing some of those root issues. It can feel overwhelming, but it's really, really important to do.
Extraordinary. And if I recall the story correctly, you even have hired a coach for yourself and your team to help push this even further along.
Yeah, so I started working with coaches right after I came to Stone Age. I hired actually a life coach who had lots of business experience, Barbara Gormley, and she's just amazing. And she is the one who really helped me understand myself, why I made the decisions that I made, why I had this deep need for recognition and to be seen, and how it was really, when it showed up in a really unhealthy way, how it was toxic to me and the people around me. And so I started having, after I had this transformational experience with her, I started having her work with other employees. And then I moved on to different coaches. I work with a different coach now. But we put together this program that really helped our employees understand their triggers, understand how they devolve when they go under stress. And she did, I mean, unbelievable things. People who we didn't think were going to make it here turned things around. People who were on the cusp of doing great things skyrocketed. It transformed so many of our employees. And so about 2 years ago, I talked her into leaving all of her private clients and coming to work exclusively for Stone Age. And so now we have a life coach who she's built this very specific program. It's called her Deep Coaching Model, and it really helps people understand themselves, understand others, understand what happens when they are triggered, when they go under stress, and helps them have those tools to be able to pull themselves out of it. So it's all still the ownership mindset, right? How are you responsible for your triggers. How are you responsible for your reaction when you are triggered, rather than saying, "Oh, well, that person triggered me. It's his or her fault." And it's just absolutely amazing. It's hard to scale because it is very one-on-one coaching. We put 8 to 10 people through a year, but I can't wait for more and more and more of our employees to go through it. We've probably had, I don't know, 30 or 40 people go through it. And every single one of them has had a life-changing experience because of it. And I can absolutely say that they are more engaged. The people who go through coaching are more engaged because they understand themselves better. They understand their stressors and their triggers. They understand their colleagues better. They take responsibility for their own responses and reactions. And they know that the company is investing in them. And that is a very, very powerful combination.
I mean, incredible. So not only have you seen and worked on the power of disengagement and what you can do about it, but you've taken it to so many deeper levels with not only having your own coach and then bringing that person in, and she's a full-time employee of Stone Age. Is that right?
She's not full-time. She's not a full-time employee, part-time, but she only works with us. Yeah.
That's extraordinary. And it looks like you have at least one fan for this investment out there. Let's see if I can get her to pop up on the screen here. Is this Janet work with your team?
Yes, Janet. Oh, Janet has had this miraculous experience with Barbara as well, and she's one of our shining examples of how somebody can transform their life when they lean into coaching, feedback, and taking responsibility for how they're showing up. So we love you, Janet.
Thank you for dropping that note in there, Janet. A couple more questions and we'll open it up to the group. I see we've got a few queuing up here. So ownership mindset, right? You shared a story with me, I think, about a VP of sales and maybe some issues happening there, in modeling the right behavior. So sort of pulling that together, what does the ownership mindset look like to you if you're going to pull your book together in a few sentences?
Yes. So, I mean, the ownership, it shows up in so many different ways, but it really comes from owning everything that happens in your life. And we recently had an experience where we were unintentionally infringing on a competitor's trademark. And we had gone down a path thinking that we could somehow get around it. And ultimately we got I wasn't aware of any of what was going on, and I got a cease and desist letter. I was like, what the heck, what are we doing here? This is not who Stone Age is. We do not infringe on people's patents and trademarks. Like, that's not what we do. And so we were digging into what had happened, and I was talking to my head of sales, and he was like, KP, that's what people call me here, KP, I don't know how this happened. And it was really it was really kind of going down to the team who made the decision, or a particular person who had made the decision. And so we were talking about how we were going to fix it. It was going to be a pretty expensive mistake, $50,000 to $100,000 to fix it. So not insignificant. And a lot of work. And so we were talking through how we were going to handle it, and I hung up with him. And then I had another one of our leaders within the company who handles contracts and compliance call me and say, "Hey, KP, like, I need you to know that this is something that happened. Here's an email chain." And our head of sales knew, he was in this email chain. Like, if he would have read the email and been part of it, we would have seen that this would have happened. So I was like, interesting. So I called back my head of sales and I said, I want you to know, like, this is what came to me. And he was like, and all of a sudden he paused and he was send me the email, and he looked at it. So I forwarded it to him. He read it. He's like, "Oh, KP, I am so sorry. I am 100% responsible for this. I blew this. This is not an excuse, but I've been so busy. I don't think I read all these emails. I wasn't paying close enough attention, and I let the team down." And he immediately went into beating himself up, and that's what he does. And I said, "Look, you don't need to beat yourself up. Like, this is an opportunity for you to really lead through this. Yes, it's a costly mistake, but the value, what we can learn from this, what the organization can learn from this, with how you choose to lead through it, is going to be priceless." And he said, 100%. You can count on me. I'm going to fix this. And so he did. And he worked with the team, and he completely owned that, the buck stopped with him, and he was not paying attention close enough to what was happening through the email chain. And being too busy is never an excuse to to let your teammates down, and we got through it, and everybody felt so much better because I think it was good, was it going to turn into this blame game, and we just said we're not going to let that happen. Right? As leaders, we are ultimately responsible for all the decisions that happen in the organization. How do we fix this? And I was so proud of him because that is the ownership mindset at work right there. And, it's not always easy. It's not always pretty. It doesn't mean that you're going to always show up with it immediately, right? We're human beings, right? We have egos to protect. We have to, all of us are looking to, how do I get out of this? Is there somebody else I can blame? Right? Those might be the natural reactions that we might have, but that doesn't have to be what our response is. We can stop ourselves and say, no, no, I'm not letting myself off the hook. I am going to lead through this way. And that's exactly what he did. And I think it's such a perfect example because it was messy, it was expensive, it was big, it was kind of swirling there. And then it was this clear moment of nope, own it. And it was just it's just one of many, many great examples of us fixing mistakes and owning up to what's happening. And I was so incredibly proud of him and the organization and the way we came together to solve and handle this problem.
I mean, talk about the ownership mindset to a T here, right? And
Yeah.
this actually created a financial hit for the company as well, which, you know, obviously
Yeah.
not a lot of fun to deal with. And there's so many things I love about the story. One, the behavior you modeled for him. I mean, think so many of us could have taken the opposite approach and just, sort of let him have it and screamed at him and, sort of gotten very angry and all these things. And so think about sort of the ripples of impact you had after that, again, to steal from Joshua Berry and his favorite phrase, and how, the conversations that went on at sort of at the water cooler after that, right?
Yeah.
Holy cow, Kerry guided me through this, coached me through it. She trusted me to make it right. And I did, versus, oh man, she's the worst and this kind of thing. Right. So just
Cool, calm, and collected, right? That is me living my mantra. I mean, freaking out never makes anything better. Never, never, ever, ever does freaking out make anything better. It might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't make anything better. And I live by that. And so if I would have freaked out in that moment, I was still looking for accountability. I was looking for my role in this too. But I wasn't going to freak out on anybody. I wasn't going to, lose control, lose my temper. And I didn't want him to do that either. And so I really have to role model that. And I just said this to my executive management team yesterday. We had a speaker come in and talk to us about being more childlike, finding joy in the moments and not taking ourselves so seriously. And I asked the question, what are you going to each do as leaders of your departments to bring more joy into the situation, into your leadership, bring more fun, more lightheartedness. And we were talking through the various things that we could do. And I said, we just have to remember, like, there is nothing that happens that is the end of the world. Nothing. Wait, we missed a sales number for a month, right? It's not the end of the world. Do we need to have accountability? Absolutely. But we need to have understanding and compassion. Nothing that we're doing is the end of the world. The only thing that would be absolutely horrific is if an employee got hurt at work, or if one of our customers lost their lives by using one of our products. Those are the things that really matter. Everything else is not the end of the world. So let's not turn it into something it doesn't need to be. And I think leaders need to lead that way. Like, we put so much unnecessary stress onto our teams because we think that it's going to be the end of the world if this doesn't happen, if this doesn't happen, and this doesn't happen. And the reality is that there's so many things that are out of our control. And the only thing that we can do is control our reactions. And so, yes, you have to work hard. You have to be accountable if you don't hit a number or you miss a goal or miss a timeline. But it doesn't mean that you have to beat people up, make people feel bad about themselves, make them live in fear, because it's not the end of the world.
Right. Sometimes we artificially make the stakes so high in our own minds, and then create a different reaction. And those reactions create an environment around us that may or may not be appealing to others.
Exactly.
Yet another incredibly powerful story. One of the things you also talked about, and I find just so powerful in the book, is you couldn't start fixing yourself until you understood yourself. How did you begin that journey, and how does this relate to self-leadership?
So when I was those few days after my overdose, when I was talking to my mom about coming home, and I had this really powerful conversation with her, and she said to me, yes, of course you can come home. But I have been listening to you talk about your career, your leadership, all the things that are wrong, all the things that you want, but you don't have yet. And I'm going to tell you, you are an amazing leader. I've seen you lead some amazing places. I was captain of my softball team my sophomore year in college. I've also seen you lead people right off of a cliff. You can be a great leader or you can be a really poor one, but you cannot be a great leader of people until you first learn how to lead yourself. You have to take responsibility for your situation, for your life. You are in the situation that you're in because you put yourself there. It's not my fault. It's not your dad's fault. It's not your boss's fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It's yours. And until you learn how to take full responsibility for everything that happens to you, you are going to be stuck. You're not going to live up to your potential, and worse, you could be dead. And it was a really, really tough conversation to hear, but it was exactly what I needed. And it was the first time I had heard of the concept of self-leadership. And you can't lead yourself well until you know yourself. And so I decided I need to start figuring out why I make these decisions that I make. Why do I do these things? When I came back to Colorado, I didn't want to go to rehab. That was way too shameful. I had way too big of an ego back then for that. And I had no money. I had actually about $100,000 in debt because I completely lived beyond my means of trying to showcase like this successful life when really I was really, really struggling inside. And the ripple effect of how that was impacting the rest of my financial life and health and all of those things. And so a friend of mine said, I was lamenting to him because I can't afford therapy, which is what I probably needed. And he said, well, why don't you do personality assessments? I think there's some free ones online. I'm like, ooh, free? Okay. And I had never done a personality assessment before. And so I did Myers-Briggs. And when I got the assessment report back, I was blown away. It was like I was reading about myself. And it completely opened my eyes to why I was doing some of the things that I was doing, some of those needs that I have, drives that I have, triggers that I have. And so I started doing every single assessment I could get my hands on. I did Enneagram, which is my favorite, Myers-Briggs, DISC, social styles, strengths finders. Like I did them all with this insatiable curiosity to understand myself. And that is how I was able to start to transform myself. That's how I found my very first coach, Barbara. She was an Enneagram coach. And I was like, I need help figuring this out about myself. And so I would not have been able to make that transition, especially at such a young age, into this leadership role, if I wouldn't have been willing to dig deep and understand my triggers, why I made the decisions I made, and most importantly, how I impact others.
I mean, such great things to reflect on, to think about, to bring to your business, and to model for your people. So, so powerful.
Yeah, when
Uh,
you're broke, it's a really good way to start to understand yourself. I mean, that was 17, almost 17 and a half years ago. And, it feels a little silly, but I'm so grateful for that advice from my friend, Paul Reese. He was the one who introduced me to Myers-Briggs because it really was one of those, the big inflection points, or maybe a small inflection point in this big inflection point that led me down this journey of really starting to learn who I was and why I do the things I do.
Incredible. And so you talked a little bit about being that, and last question here, and then we're going to jump over to the ones in the chat.
Yeah.
You talked about this competitive spirit, being the captain of your team, and as a young person in college. How has that competitive spirit evolved for you over time?
Now I'm just more competitive with myself. I used to want to win, and that was a big piece of that, needing to be seen as the best. And now through maturing, through growth, through lots of coaching and deep self analysis, reflection, I've learned that comparing, it gets you nowhere. In fact, comparing yourself to others can lead you to some really dark places. It makes you do things that aren't aligned with your values, that aren't aligned with your skills and talents. And it makes you feel bad about yourself. And I'm 45 years old now. Like, I don't want to feel bad about myself. I want to feel good about myself. while I'm still working on those parts of me that I don't necessarily like, right? That are those triggers that pull me back. And so now it's like, how do I be the best person that I can be? And just know that sometimes things don't need improving. Sometimes it's okay to just let it be and let things unfold to see what happens, right? Life is amazing and there's nothing that we can control except for our breath and our moment and our reaction right in this moment. And even though I've worked so hard to try to control all these outcomes, to force outcomes, to influence the outcomes that I want, because I'm just so much more comfortable in my own skin and comfortable with things unfolding and not always having to win and be the best. Now it's just about, how do I just be me? And if I'm going to compete, I'm going to compete with myself. Like, for example, my book number 2 is going to be better than my book number 1. And I don't even know that that's competitiveness, right? I think that's just this constant desire to learn and grow and continuously improve.
Unbelievable story. And I love that you've gone from this sort of external competition with competing with others to really competing with yourself, and
Yeah.
how you've redefined your own goals about self-improvement and helping others evolve, and really turn that competitive spirit on yourself. If people want to connect with Kerry, I dropped her LinkedIn link in the chat there. Definitely follow her, send a connection request. And I'd also encourage you, if you're thinking about who's going to be the speaker at your next company meeting, Kerry also does professional speaking and has an extraordinary story to tell. You can go learn more about that at kerrysiggins.com/speaking. So let's jump over to some of the audience questions here. And we've got so many great notes in the chat here that as I'm scrolling through and I missed. I see, my good friend Berta and PA calling in here today. Lynn, superstar Lynn is joining us as well. And so many other folks jumping in on the call here. I want to go to this first question I see in the chat here from John Thompson, author of Stack Your Deck, How to Be an Ace in Business and Life. He had a question here around, what advice would you do? What advice would you have needed earlier in your life in your career to get it that when you got into drugs and you experienced the overdose? What would have helped you there, you think?
That's a great question. I don't think that, no, I mean, it's really good. And no one's ever actually asked me that before.
Well
And
played,
I want to
John.
be
Well
thoughtful.
played.
I want to be thoughtful in my response. So, I don't know. I don't even know if there is anything anybody could have said to me that would have changed it. Right. I mean, it was a journey that I was on, and I had so many great mentors and people in my life and who were saying things. I mean, my mom at 16 years old, like, almost kicked me out of the house because I was, getting in trouble and so wild. And I think that I wouldn't have listened to anybody because I was just determined to do things my way and live the life that I thought that I wanted to live. So I don't know if somebody would have been able to say something to me personally that would have maybe changed this path. And I don't even know that I would have wanted to change it. You know, it, I've learned so much. I'm so grateful for all the experience that I've had, even in those darkest moments, because they've shaped who I am today, my leadership style, and who I am as a human being. But I will tell you one experience that I wish would have gone differently. And it is not in any sense that this is this person's responsibility, but when I was spiraling down, it was about a year after I graduated from Colorado School of Mines, and my boss at the time, was amazing, he was the best boss I've ever had. I have so much respect for him. It was obvious I was spiraling. And I get what it's like when you have employees who are spiraling and you have to go, do I really want to get involved? Do I really want to ask questions about what's happening? And when I was leaving the company, I wanted him so badly to ask, like, are you okay? And he didn't. And I've taken that forward because I think that because I had so much respect for him, if I could have told him, I am so lost right now and this is what's happening, I think having like that kind of person to talk to, wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have been really great to have somebody I respected so much and admired so much to say, I care about you. Are you okay? And I get it. And it was not his responsibility. And in no way am I saying that he should have done that. But what I have taken forward from that is when I see employees who are struggling, I ask because I know how much that would have meant to me in that time. And I don't know that it would have been advice or changing it, but just having that person who is not your mom, not in those inner circles, but somebody who you have that respect for, to just go, you're not okay. You're not okay. What's going on? I think that I know that would have made me feel seen. Whether it would have changed anything or not, I have no idea.
Wow. Well, very thoughtful question, and what an extraordinarily thoughtful answer there, Kerry. And I really appreciate the fact that you said one, you would have loved it if your manager at the time did come to you and ask, but also recognize that it's not necessarily their responsibility. But boy, can that have an impact, as you've learned throughout your own journey.
Exactly.
I want to flip over to our rapid fire questions now. If we could run through
Yes.
these real quick, and if we have time, there's a few more questions loaded up, but I want to make sure we get through these because these are fun, and I think it really gives a great understanding of the guests on the show here. So you ready to jump into the rapid fire questions?
Let's do it.
Favorite thing to cook? I think this is always a big one.
Green chili.
Love it. First concert you went to?
New Kids on the Block.
Shout out to NKOTB.
Grand Junction, Colorado.
That's a first NKOTB on the show here reference, by the way. Last photo on your phone?
My dog.
Woof. One thing you own you really should probably get rid of?
Oh my God, nothing. I get rid of everything. Well, that's not true. Okay. I am I throw stuff away. My husband's like, why are you throwing that away? I was like, because we're never going to use it again. And I've even accidentally thrown my son's homework that he's supposed to be turning in, thinking that it's something coming home, away. But I have a lot of clothes. I love clothes. And so I probably need to get rid of half of the stuff in my closet.
Get ready. Goodwill, Durango, Colorado. All right. Most audacious goal for your book?
I wanted to win Wall Street Journal bestseller, and I didn't, at least not yet. So I didn't hit that one, but I learned so much in the process. And so now my biggest goal is to have it just make a huge impact. If everybody who reads it, if they can just take one thing about it and improve their leadership style, then I'm doing my job as an author, as a leader, and as a fellow human being. So now that I put that big one away that I didn't hit, I just want it to be impactful, and for people to, like you do, like you get a nugget out of it that says, I can do something different. I can be a better leader.
I have learned so much reading your book. Literally, my copy of your book is just littered with highlights. So thank you for that. If you could describe your writing journey in 5 words, Kerry, what would you go with?
Hard, fun, hard, time consuming, and this is a phrase, one of the most important things I've ever done in my life.
Incredible. I mean, it's so fascinating for someone to find sort of the pleasure and in so many painful moments and discomfort in their lives. And you've done that so flawlessly again and again. And certainly it hasn't been your journey hasn't been without challenges, but you found a way to overcome them and see them as a gift, which is such a powerful mindset. Kerry, closing thoughts for our listeners here.
Closing thoughts. I've learned so much about myself through this concept of owning everything that happens in my life, that things don't happen to me, they happen because of me. The ownership mindset is probably the most powerful mindset that you can have to change your life, to improve your life. When you own it, you empower yourself. You don't wait for somebody else to empower you. You empower yourself. I owned it when I took a huge risk and applied for a job I was underqualified for, and walked into John and Jerry's office and bet on myself, and look at where I am 17 years later. I own it. By owning it, I have overcome substance abuse issues. I've overcome my ego controlling my triggers and my reactions and my desire to constantly be recognized. I've transformed my life, and I've watched the same thing happen for everybody else who embraces it. When you own it, when you embrace the own it mindset, you can absolutely change your life. Is it going to be easy? No. No steps in this process have been easy, but they have been so incredibly powerful. And so I just want to encourage you to own it. And how you know when you're not is when you say, but. Yeah, I would have done that, but. Yeah, I would have hit that deadline, but. I would have done this, but. Oh, I get this piece of feedback, but what about everybody else? But is your easiest word the easiest trigger word in your brain to say, I'm not owning it. So when you hear yourself saying, yeah, but, that's when you can turn that around and say, yes, and this is how I'm going to fix it. This is how I'm going to be part of a solution. This is how I'm going to change my life.
Be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and
Yep.
eradicate but from your vocabulary. Kerry, I love that. And thank you for sharing your message and an offer that you've made for our listeners here today. If you go on porchlight.com, which is the link I just dropped in the chat there, Kerry's offering a signed copy of her book for 20% off for a limited time. Definitely go out and grab a copy of that and get more of and more deeply into this incredible story that Kerry has shared here today. Kerry, thank you for sharing your journey with me and our audience. Destigmatizing our faults is never easy. I appreciate you making the conversation so accessible with your vulnerability and modeling that behavior daily, but also this brilliant roadmap you offer in your new book and the powerful outcomes that often are just sitting on the other side of taking ownership of our lives. Thank you for being a guest here today.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you to our listeners. Definitely go check out Kerry's book, The Ownership Mindset, a handbook for transforming your life and leadership. As I said, get that signed copy. And I would encourage you to think about 5 people in your life who need this book and need to hear this message today, and get a copy and share it with them as your gift to them for 2024. So as I said, if you want to connect with her at Kerry-Siggins on LinkedIn or kerrysiggins.com. And lastly, I invite you to go out and get this book and really give it a read. And I think you'll find yourself very much filling it with highlights for me as well, as I did as well. And join me next Friday to meet financial services leader turned executive coach Shannon Talbot to explore how she chose to chase her happy, and how her life changed from doing just that. I'm your host, John Saunders. Thanks for joining us. Keep moving forward.